Hey, welcome to Woodwork Life. So I don't know about you guys, but I do a lot of my research into what's popular and trending in furniture by checking out some of the high-end furniture catalogs from companies like Restoration Hardware, Ethan Allen, places like that. And I've come to see that some of that modern minimalist furniture that's so popular on the inside of people's houses is starting to make its way outside. But they're also using a lot of exotic lumbers like mahogany and teak and things like that are standing up to the elements pretty well. But I figure there's gotta be a way to make a cheap and simple version of that furniture to go outside. So here's my take on a modern minimalist Adirondack chair with that comfortable layback angle that just wants to suck you in for that afternoon nap on a spring or summer afternoon. I don't want to talk about it anymore, so let's just jump into the build. Let's do this.
Alright, so first things first, let's get some materials. I went to Home Depot, I had to pick up one sheet of plywood, and where do they keep that stuff again? As far as basic plywood goes, I prefer their Pine 23/32 4x8 sheets, and I like to have them cut at the panel saw there so they're easier to take home. Now they typically claim to be within 1/8 of an inch, but I usually leave myself an extra 1/4 of an inch, just so I can trim it down to final dimensions once I get it home. Next I went through a selection of dimensional 1x6s. These are actually 3/4 by 5.5, but I tried to find the straightest ones I could find. Not all of these boards are as prime as others, so look for the straightest ones you can find. My next mission was to find some outdoor cushions that didn't cost an arm and a leg. I searched ahead a little bit online and found that Target had a pretty good selection of outdoor cushions. So I went to Target and saw what they had and hey, hit the nail on the head. So each of these chairs takes 4 1x6s and half a sheet of plywood. You'll need a circular saw or a miter saw, a square, and your chosen joinery. In this case I use Kreg pocket holes, but you could also use dowels just the same, or floating mortise and tenon joints like the domino, if that's what you're into. Now if you're going to cut this with a circular saw, be sure to be super accurate with your markup and know which side of the line you want to cut on. Also, use a framing square to line up your saw, because it's critical that all these joints are perfectly square. Now I personally use a stop block and my miter saw, and you can see how I built this in a previous video. I'll link to this up in the corner. The nice thing about setting up a stop block is that you can really batch out the cuts quickly and accurately and ensure that they're all the same size. So whether you set up a temporary one or a permanent one, it's really helpful for batching out all these cuts. Now like I said, I'm using the Kreg K5 pocket hole jig to cut all my joinery. Now, one of the critical mistakes a lot of people make is they forget to set the depth of your bit. Now, you want it to be the depth of a quarter or a nickel, some sort of thin coin away from the bottom of the jig, and then you tighten the collet before you start cutting your holes. Now, I might have gone a little bit overkill with the pocket hole joinery. I cut 3 holes per joint, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I did test this joinery in a previous video. I'll link that up in the corner here. And the pocket hole is more than adequate for a lot of these joints. I cut in some extra ones into the seat just to make sure it was extra strong, and I don't think there's gonna be a problem with it. Now this piece is going outside, but I am going to paint it, but I still want to cover the edge of the plywood with some edge banding before I paint it. So I used FastCap's edge banding system with the quad roller and the quad cutter, and this makes it super quick and easy, and this is actually a pretty cheap setup. I'll link to that down below in the description. Next it was just time to screw together all the pieces. None of the dimensions are particularly critical, but I like to have this bottom stretcher centered, and other than that, it's just really making sure that everything's square and straight as you put it together. Now I do have full plans and cut lists for this project available on my website, and that link is in the description below, or if you want to consider being a patron on Patreon, I give all my plans on there away for free. So check that out at patreon.com/WoodWorkLIFE. I used a couple of scraps cut to 6.5 inches to perfectly space that front support. Each of those supports had a 10-degree bevel, and then I seated the chair into those supports. Then I attached them with a couple of screws and some glue. I used a speed square to ensure that my spacing was perfect going into that back support. That way it wouldn't just drill into nothing. The screws are essentially just there to help clamp for the glue to dry, The glue is going to dry way harder than the screws are ever going to hold it. Now finally it was time to see how those cushions fit in and give it its first initial test fit. I designed the layback angle on this after a classic Adirondack chair, so it should be pretty comfortable, and oh, it was. Now it was time to prep for paint. I wanted to plug those pocket holes, and you can use either Kreg's pocket hole plugs they sell or a 3/8 inch dowel. I personally found that the 3/8 inch dowel actually went a little bit faster, but I guess to each his own. Now it might be interesting to see the time savings from building this out of dowels versus pocket holes, because with dowels you still have clamping and glue drying time to worry about, whereas with the pocket holes, those function as the clamps, but you have all this extra time to put into plugging the holes. So I guess 6 one way, half a dozen the other. After sanding everything down to 150 grit, which really only took a couple passes, and patching into the major holes with caulking or spackle or whatever your method of choice is, it was time to put on some paint. I used PPG Paint Plus Primer and a Wagner sprayer to spray this real quick. It really only took about 15-20 minutes per side, and that was even with moving the camera around. Like I said in my last video, I'm becoming a big fan of spraying finishes.
Okay. Oh, okay. It feels great. I think it's just missing like 1 or 2 more things. Oh yeah, now that's done. That's perfect. Wait, one more thing. There we go, ready for the summer. So remember, the full plans and cut lists for this project are available on my website or for free to any of my Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smack that like button, drop a comment down below, and if you want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe to the Wood.Work.LIFE channel. And above everything, remember, keep your tools sharp, and keep your mind sharper.